Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 9th meeting of the Committee on Policing and Community Engagement. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Tonight, we have an agenda that will allow us to have guests be with us, join us from Facebook. Right now, what I'd like to do is to read to you the meeting participation instructions. Members of the public who wish to share feedback during the public comment period must do so by using the Raise Your Hand feature in the BlueJeans teleconferencing application, which will allow for either audio or audio-visual participation. Members of the public may also share their written comments with committee staff in advance of the meeting by sending them to communications@unioncity.org. Comments sent into the committee staff in advance will be read onto the record during the public comment period. This meeting will be streamed live to the City of Union City Facebook page. However, we will not be monitoring or accepting public comments through the Facebook during this meeting. Item 3 is roll call. Emma?
Vice Mayor Emily Duncan.
Here.
Councilmember Pat Gakoskos.
Here.
Commissioner Melissa Schwen Mallory. Commissioner Michelle Williams Smith.
Here.
And Commissioner Jonathan Petty.
Here.
Okay, thank you. So on our agenda tonight, we have 2 opportunities for public comment. Our first public comment time is next on the agenda. We've allotted 30 minutes here for any public comment that we receive. And as I mentioned earlier, you can click on the raise your hand item and you will be acknowledged by staff, and you'll have 3 minutes in this section for public comment. So members of the public are invited to speak, and we would look forward to hearing from you. Are there any hands raised?
There are no hands raised right now.
Okay. Did we get any written comments that we want to read into the public record?
There are none.
Okay. Well, if someone who's on the line has a thought and wants to share it with us later, we will have a second public comment later in the meeting. So we're going to move on then to item 5, which is a follow-up since our last meeting. Lauren is going to update us on the action items that have taken place since our last meeting. Lauren?
Yes, thank you, Emily. So there's been a number of things since our last meeting. Everybody may recall we had a very good conversation about stakeholders that we wanted to reach out to. So we got to business very quickly, making sure that we can create an outreach schedule for everybody. I'm going to go down a list of just some action items so I can put it all on the record. We are managing our outreach lists on an Excel spreadsheet. This is just an internal management tool that we're really, each time names come into us, we throw it onto the list. We make sure we have contact information, email addresses, phone numbers, and then we're also just kind of keeping sharp notes on when we're reaching out to them and sending invitations and when we can get them scheduled. There is a dedicated web page for this committee that's been put together. I put together a shortened URL to make it easy for everybody to remember. It's unioncity.org/PCE committee. If you actually go to tonight's meeting agenda, the URL is on there as well. On this dedicated web page, it not only talks about what the committee's purpose is, but it names who's on the committee, and really anything that's been a public document since we have stored here. So we have the resolution that the City Council approved establishing the committee. We have the last couple meeting agendas posted, so all future meeting agendas will be posted there. We have a list of upcoming meetings that this committee will be having. We have all of the proper Blue Jeans information, whether it's calling in or going on to the web link. All of that's there for people to make it easy to access. We did start an anonymous online form. You can share your name and your contact information if you want, but you can also share anonymous feedback with us. So if you want to share your thoughts with the committee, you can go to this form. It's on the website. And then we also put a template invitation letter, and I'll talk about that in a second here. But we put a sample letter that we've been sending out to stakeholders, inviting them to come speak to the committee. So that's on there. And the last thing that's on there is we'll be putting recordings of this video on keeping just for transparency purposes. So if people want to go ahead and look at past meetings, they can go to the web page. In terms of the process to invite speakers, so we haven't closed the door on taking recommendations on who we want to engage in with this committee. So committee members, I encourage you to continue to share your recommendations with us, and so can members of the public. We still want to make sure we try to cover a wide array of community members and have them come to the committee and address the committee on matters of policing. We are, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of process we have in place is we have a letter that we're sending out to committee members, and then we're basically just working them in the schedule over the next few Thursdays. I just want to make a note too, is that as we move forward, it would be really helpful if committee members and members of the public who are really proactive and engaging in this committee, make sure that you send your recommendations into us and let staff schedule the meetings, just because it makes it easier. There's a lot of work to do over the next few weeks, and we're trying to keep a tight schedule. And then, Emily, I think that just about sums it up unless you have any other updates to provide.
No, I think that's good, but I think this is a good opportunity to pause and see if there are any questions or comments from any of the committee members about things that we've been working on over the last week. I can start with you, Pat, to see if there are any questions or comments that you'd like to make.
I just think I want to know how many people have been signed up or have signed up to speak.
Or how many names are on the spreadsheet?
How many names have been, submitted, or, we expect to, how many people are we expecting to speak to our committee?
Yeah, so I can pull up the list. I didn't have it open, Pat, readily. I'm so sorry. I can pull up the list and then maybe just later on during good of the order report back on that number real quick, and I can maybe even give you a sense of how many letters have gone out, and if you're curious to just maybe the number of people we've been able to get scheduled over the next couple of weeks. So I'm happy to, if we circle back under good of the order, I'll report back on that.
Okay, yeah, that's all, Emily.
Okay, Michelle, did you have a question or want to make a comment at this point?
The only question at this moment that I have is, last week we spoke about if someone was to want to raise their hand or they wanted to talk or anything like that, that we said that they would have to give their name and their address, and we were going to make a decision on that they didn't need to give their address because of certain situations that they could be concerned about.
Okay. If we have individuals who want to speak and don't want to give us their address, they can just give us their name and what city they represent. That would be okay. That would be helpful for us. Okay. Thank you. Jonathan?
Yes, and I don't have any questions. I was just looking at the website. I think it looks great. I'm happy there's a ability for our community to be able to give us some responses, give us their thoughts, and give them, if they want to give them anonymously. I think that's great.
Yeah, and we have been receiving them, and we will compile them and bring them back to the committee and for the public to hear also. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, thank you, Lauren. we're going to move into item 6, which is new business. One of the priorities of this committee is to listen to and hear concerns of the community. So the next section in this agenda tonight is called our community listening sessions. And what we had originally scheduled were 4 members, but it turns out tonight we'll have 3. One of our invitees at the last minute had to cancel. And what we've done is we've asked each of our invited guests to talk with us for 10 minutes. And during that period of time, we have encouraged them to talk to us about issues, concerns, and recommendations they may have about how we can improve policing in Union City. We're going to hear from each of our 3 presenters, and then at the conclusion of our 3 presenters, we will have the opportunity to have comments from the committee and from the public. So with that, I think we will start. Let's see who we have here. I think Erin, you're on the list here first, so we'll start with you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This seems like a really important series of meetings, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to share the perspective of Calico. I am the executive director of Calico Center, which is the only children's advocacy center serving Alameda County. What Calico does is we work very closely with every law enforcement agency in the county, including Union City PD, to respond to allegations of child abuse. When someone reports that a child has been abused or a child discloses that they've been abused, police, so including Union City PD detectives, can bring that child to Calico's office, which is a child-friendly office, where a trained child interview specialist will interview the child about what happened to them in an evidence-based, trauma-informed, developmentally appropriate way to get the story of what happened to that child from their abuser in the child's own words. This is instead of having to interview a child in their own home, maybe with the abuser in the next room, in a school's principal office, which is a place they normally might go when they're in trouble, at a police station, or even in a police car. This interview at Calico is observed in a different room by a police officer, a child welfare worker, and a district attorney, so that all of their questions for their investigations can be answered at one time. Before Calico, it wasn't uncommon for a child abuse victim to be interviewed up to 21 different times by 17 different people, which was re-traumatizing that child over and over again. Now they're just interviewed once, and that interview is recorded so that if anyone else becomes involved in the investigation, they can just watch the Calico interview and not have to go back to the child. While that's going on, we also make sure that that child and whoever is a safe adult taking care of them gets the appropriate mental health care, medical care, legal care, and whatever resources that family needs to ensure that when they leave Calico, they're surrounded by a safety net of support. Lately, we've been seeing more severe needs in our families. We've located some funding for gift cards to Safeway and Target so that families who are food insecure can have some funds to buy food or basic necessities and hygiene items at Target, but that is kind of a limited resource. We've been open during this pandemic. Since the shelter in place order came down, we have seen over 80 children at our office. That's lower than we normally see. We usually see 700 children a year at Calico, 74% of whom are victims of child sexual abuse. But 80 is still a high number. In the last 5 years, we've seen 115 children from Union City alone. We are worried about the children that aren't reporting abuse right now and that we aren't reaching our office because of the shelter in place and community restrictions. Although 80 sounds like a lot, again, it's a lot fewer than normal, and that's because children aren't generally around teachers, friends, school counselors, school resource officers, and other mandated reporters or safe adults in their life who they may disclose that they are being abused and then who would report it to law enforcement. What research and doctors are predicting is that when society opens back up and our community starts to move back to normal, that there is going to be what some people call a tsunami and what other people are calling a surge of child abuse reports being made to police departments. We want to make sure that in our county, both Calico and our partner law enforcement jurisdictions are prepared to meet this so-called tsunami, particularly the special victims units who handle these most sensitive cases of sexual abuse. We know that sexual abuse is correlated, increases in that is correlated with times of economic stress, isolation in families, and increased substance and alcohol abuse, all of which is occurring during this time. So we have a real worry, and we want to make sure that we are able to support the children who need these services. When a child comes to Calico, they are 4 times more likely to receive mental health care. They are 3 times more likely to receive appropriate medical care, and over 95% of their parents say they are pleased with the investigation and the process at Calico. We have been partners with Union City PD since 1997 and have a long-standing positive relationship with both the leadership and the SVU detectives who we see most often. We really want to ensure that this victim-centered approach that we use, that Union City and our other partners buy into, and putting the child's needs at the forefront of any investigation and any response is maintained, even despite the other challenges that are going on during this time. Appropriate intervention, response, and treatment to child abuse and child trauma is vital to the success of any community. There are several studies that show the lifelong effects that child abuse can have when it's not treated on children, including increased heart disease, lung disease, depression and other mental illnesses, and increased absences at work. So investing in appropriate treatment for child trauma on the front end pays off in the long run. It's also really important to be able to hold particularly child sexual abusers accountable. Most research shows that when someone sexually offends against a child in a hands-on manner, that they don't have just one child abuse victim, they have many. In fact, one study found that they had the average child offender at a prison had an average of 113 hands-on offenses against at least 13 children. Now, that was just one study, but it shows that there is a need for some law enforcement intervention in these severe child abuse cases to keep the whole community safe. Child centers like Calico have been around for about 30 years nationwide, and we are starting to slowly see, again nationwide and not talking about this particular pandemic period, a slight decrease in the rates of child sexual abuse, and some are attributing it to the fact that we may be holding accountable the most dangerous offenders in a more successful manner than we used to be. Of course, at this meeting, I feel like I would be really remiss if I didn't touch on the unique traumas and the special consideration that we need to give to Black children and children of color. The American Association of Pediatrics said, and I'm reading this, so I'm looking down, that almost 65% of African American youth reported traumatic experiences. That's not necessarily abuse, but a traumatic experience, compared to 30% of their peers from other races. And that even witnessing acts of racism against other people caused a psychological and physiological response akin to first responders remembering witnessing a disaster. Because of this extra vulnerability and layer of trauma, it's really important that children of color, and all children, but particularly children of color, be able to access these types of services and get the appropriate response that Union City PD partners with us when they are hurt even more by someone. And I'd like to just end my brief time talking by giving you a quote from a child who was from Union City and came through Calico when she was 8. She is now a teenager and did a little fundraiser for us and raised some stuffed animals and brought them to our office. And she said she remembers coming to Calico. She wrote, "I remember the green walls. I remember the warm smile of Catherine, the kind woman who interviewed me. Calico created a safe environment where I was able to tell my story without feeling like I was in the wrong. It helped make a terrifying time less frightening." So I just want to say, in the midst of these very important conversations about communities and police and the relationship between the two, there is something that Union City does right, and there's something that Alameda County does right, and it's child sexual abuse investigations. And I hope to have the continued support of your city in standing up for the children who are vulnerable and preparing for the fact that there may be many more that we are finding out about as we open up. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us and sharing your experience with Union City Policing. Thank you very much. So our next presenter tonight will be Harpal Mann. Harpal, I see you've joined us as a presenter. Welcome.
Yes, good evening, Vice Mayor Emily Duncan, Council Member Gagoskos, and the rest of the members of the panel. It's an honor and a privilege to be considered to provide feedback to your distinguished panel. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate you and our mayor for putting this panel together and listening to the needs of our community. So thank you, for your leadership and to our mayor's leadership. I have been involved in issues regarding the police with our former chief of police, retired Chief Darrell McAllister, at length talking about some of the issues that communities of color have faced. And I would like this panel to look into some of the issues that I have seen personally that the city needs to address. One is the misuse of the 911 system, in which citizens, when they see a person of color, especially, and this goes, including from people of color calling someone, calling 911 when they see an African American walking in the neighborhood and they see a suspicious person walking. This was quite prevalent initially in the next door communities. I wrote to them because it is discrimination. Just because a citizen is walking in a street does not mean that they mean any harm. And this comes to the whole point of the unconscious bias that exists amongst all of us, including members of other communities of color. And this is an abuse of the 911 system. And I think the council and the city needs to take this seriously, that there has to be repercussions for people calling police for unintended consequences. We all know the fact that the police was called in Minneapolis for George Floyd for a $20 bill. That should not be prioritized. And the police command staff need to look into some of these calls and prioritize where should the police go. So that's a structural and fundamental, in my opinion, decision that the city needs to, ask the police and the police dispatch units to address, right? How serious is a crime, and is it because someone doesn't like someone that the police is called on? And unfortunately, the consequences come when, sometimes can be tragic, and it drives fear in the community. No one should be afraid to walk in any neighborhood, anywhere in this country, just because of the skin of your color, the way you look, or who you are. The second thing that has been brought to my attention by members of the community is at times some of the newer officers within the PD, very aggressive in enforcing traffic stops or perceived traffic violations, whether it's a rolling stop sign in different neighborhoods, and people feel that they're being picked not because of the sign, but because of the color of their skin. And this is something I brought up previously to previous Chief McAllister, and it's still work in progress that needs to be addressed. The other thing is given the negative perception of police, not only here in Union City but around the country, there is fear that the police may completely pull back and not enforce the law and where they need to. And as an example, I can talk about the past July 4th weekend, in which even as of last night, in my neighborhood, firecrackers are going up at 12 midnight, 1 o'clock, and these are pretty significant fireworks, and that's a disruption to communities. For folks who have kids, kids wake up in the middle of the night and there's fear, and I think those are things in which it's similar. It's just a few neighborhood neighbors or folks who do that, and the police need to enforce the law there. There's something of a concern to me overall is due to COVID and the fact that our sales tax revenues are lower. There's a budget impact not only just to the police department but overall to the city. The community is concerned about basic services. Is the city able to address basic services? And I think, for the council and for this committee, yourself, Vice Mayor Duncan, Councilmember Kagoskos, and, our Mayor, Carol Dutra-Bonacci, and the other council members, I mean, this is something that needs to be addressed in assuring the public that, yes, we do have issues, but, what is prioritized? And amongst those, is basic services, security being one of them, but other basic services in the city need to continue. Now, as far as, some of the recommendations, other than, so the one was the misuse of the 9/11 call, but that, needs to have direction from this committee and the council. I would encourage the council and this committee to look at the COPS program. It was a very successful program. It was launched by, former Chief McAllister. I know there are budget issues, but it worked. The police was out there in the neighborhoods, meeting with, different communities, engaging with communities, and that helped, the trust factor between, especially communities of color and the police. So if there is something that the city or the council or this committee can do is to see how can that be prioritized, at least a version of that program be introduced back. I would also encourage that overall, not only through the police department but through the city, we need to look into a diversified workforce that represents the makeup of the city. I have lived in some of the riots, including when I was a student in Los Angeles. You saw what happened in Minnesota, see what happens in New York. And part of it is the police department or the folks in the police department do not live in the city. In the example of Los Angeles, most of the police force lived in Simi Valley. Yet, they were enforcing laws in South Central LA. I would, highly encourage that the city should look into that. Is there a way to prioritize, a kid who's gone to Logan, lives in the city, may not be perfect, but, should be given a chance to serve their community because they know the community better than anyone from, traveling from San Ramon or Walnut Creek to enforce the law here in Union City. So these were my brief remarks. I think overall, given the citizens' right to protest, and it was justified. I also commend the preparedness of the city in making sure that people had the right to protest, but public property and businesses were not damaged. And to that, the community gives credit to all of the people within the city who worked hard to make sure that people had the right to protest, but there wasn't damage to businesses. Those are my brief remarks. Once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Well, thank you, Harpal, for joining us and for sharing with us not only your experiences, but some recommendations that we can note, because at the end of the conversations, we do want to go back to the council and to the police department with feedback from the community as to ways we can get better. So we've noted your comments and we thank you.
Thank you.
So our third and final speaker for today's listening session is an old friend of ours who used to be the former chair of the Human Relations Commission. Derek, it's good to have you back on the screen. We welcome you and look forward to your remarks. I think you're on mute, though. You need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
All right. Can you guys see me and hear me?
We can now. Yes, thank you.
All right. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks to the committee, city council, and commissioners for the opportunity to speak tonight. It's good to be back around some very familiar faces and people that I worked with closely for a few years. So I didn't want to leave anything out, and I have a lot to say, so I wrote my remarks down. You guys know how I roll.
Okay.
So first off, I want to say I'm very encouraged that Union City has assembled this committee to address the issue of the relationship between community and police in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the resulting national unrest. I'm not going to use my time to rattle off a list of policy prescriptions to you guys. I'm not going to yell at you about 8 can't wait. I'm not going to debate the finer points of use of force. While I absolutely feel that policy change is the end game for this issue and for our city, what I want to offer tonight is some advice on how we collectively approach this issue. I want to talk about the attitude and the mindset that informs policy. If we're not seeing this problem the same way, policy changes are sure to miss the mark and fall flat. And I don't think any of us want that. So what I want to do is use my lived experience as a 50-year-old Black man in America raising 2 Black sons, and as a Union City resident for 15 years, and I want to offer some advice through that lens. And I have 3 specific things that I would respectfully ask this committee consider. The first piece of advice I have is to be clear on desired outcomes. I think it's really important that you all define the terms that you use. A great example of this is the phrase defund the police. This has been horribly politicized by both the left and the right because it's been thrown out as a poorly defined social media hashtag. And it's been twisted by it's been twisted across the political spectrum. And to be clear, my view is that stripping police budgets down to 0 would be foolish for any community and is a recipe for anarchy. However, judiciously diverting funds away from police budgets make a lot of sense to me. Many community incidents do not call for a police officer with a gun when a mental health or family therapy professional would be far more effective. My second piece of advice, and some of you may take this critically, but that's okay, I'm not a commissioner anymore. Dispense with the political window dressing. Stop maneuvering. Stop worrying about votes and elections and money and endorsements and appointments. Serve your community instead of focusing on your political preservation. Center the community. Have real two-way conversation. Listen with the intent to understand. Don't dig your heels in and talk past one another. The national conversation about policing parallels the conversation we are all having about racism right now. And the truth is, I strongly feel these conversations are intertwined. Your efforts will bear no real fruit if you're not brave enough to be vulnerable and you're not courageous enough to be honest. Going back to the racism analogy, my white friends, several of them, who have engaged me to have a talk about racism, understand this concept because I've responded by speaking to them clearly and unapologetically about the role they play as white people in systemic oppression and how their daily actions sustain 400 years of racial disenfranchisement. And not all of my friends listen. I've lost a few friends, people who I thought were friends, but the ones who commit to listening are the ones who will help solve the problem. So no listening, no solution. I can't stress that enough. The last piece of advice I have for the committee, and I think this is probably the most important and the deepest and the most complicated, is to acknowledge some hard truths that in my view are irrefutable. All too often, community leaders and police departments conveniently dance around this issue and they avoid leaning into it. For the first time in nearly 30 years as a working professional, I'm having open conversations in the race about workplace. Stuff would get me fired in the 80s. You just can't do that, but I'm doing it. I'm using my platform as a leader to have conversations with people and draw people in. And I'm not holding back. Communities need to take a similar approach to discussing policing, in my view. We need to face the facts. We need to admit that police brutality is real. We need to acknowledge that Black and brown communities are over-policed by design, and remember that Union City is over 70% people of color. We need to own the truth about uneven application of force based on skin color. Think about the DNA of American policing rooted in slave patrols and how that manifests today in 2020. Think about the scars and wounds that define this city. Think about the DNA of Union City policing with the assassination of our own police chief in 1974 due to racial tension. Think about the events that led to the formation of the Human Relations Commission. Think about the racial tension that's present in this city. It's not always obvious, but it's real and it's simmering and it's under the surface. And it's intertwined with this policing issue. Don't puff out your chest and think that Union City is different or special or we don't do that here. The conditions for police misconduct are as real in Union City as they are in any other American town. Take it from a man who strives to be a model citizen, who tried real hard to check all the boxes and follow all the rules, but I was still racially profiled and harassed on these streets by a Union City police officer. Take it from a man who has a good relationship with many in the Union City Police Department, including Chief Renetti, but who also understands it would be naive to assume that my tall, athletic, Black teenage sons will be treated fairly and with compassion if and when they interact with our police force. History and my own life experience have taught me that caution with law enforcement is a survival tactic. And I'm not ashamed to say that or afraid to say that. I know I'm alive right now because of how careful I've been with the police over the last 50 years. So the last thing that I'll say is, please don't rush to solutions. Please don't engage in ceremonial, things that look good but aren't effective. Take the time to step back from all the smoke and the noise and the heat of this moment and orient yourselves and clearly align on the impact that you want to have. Engage our police department as a stakeholder that's accountable to the community, not as an enemy to be destroyed. I would ask you all to just open your minds and challenge yourselves. And believe it or not, that's all I have to say. Thanks a lot for your time. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to reconnect and share some of what's on my mind. I mean, I'm carrying a weight right now as we have this national conversation, and the opportunity to do this is kind of therapeutic. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us. We knew that you would come to us and you would speak straight truth to us, and we appreciate that. And we want to acknowledge that you may or may not have had the time to say everything that's on your mind. So know that if you decide in a week or two that you have some additional thoughts that you'd like to bring back to us, we'd be open to hearing them, because we are not going to rush to solutions, and we want to make the time and take the time to hear from our community. And if you know of people that you think have concerns and issues that we should hear, please recommend that they be in touch with us. Thank you so much. It was great to hear your voice, and see you again.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Appreciate it.
So as I mentioned earlier that we were going to have 4 speakers, but tonight one of our speakers had to drop out, so we've only have 3, but our plan is going forward to have 4 speakers to join us, to share with us at least for 10 minutes what their experience has been, and give us some insight and some thoughts as we've received tonight. So at this point, I'd like to just pause and see if there are any comments that any of the committee members would like to make about any of the comments they've heard, or we have not positioned and framed this such that the committee will be asking our presenters questions. We didn't want them to feel that they were going to come and get attacked by our committee. We wanted to receive what they had to say, acknowledge it, and note it. But if any of our committee members would like to make a comment, this would be a great opportunity to do that. Melissa, we see that you've joined us. Thank you so much. Hope everything worked out for you. So why don't we start with you, Melissa? Do you have any comments you made? I don't know at what point you joined us and how many of our presenters you had the opportunity to hear, but if you'd like to make a comment about what you did hear, this would be a great time to do that.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for being here tonight. I really appreciate all your feedback. I was able to get on the meeting at the end of Aaron's presentation or speech, and I think all 3 of you have given us a lot of really great feedback, and I just want to say thank you, and that I'm very grateful that you were here to speak to us.
Great, thank you. Pat, would you like to make any comments at this point?
Yeah, it's really wonderful that we have invited these 3 great speakers, I would say, as we start our committee meeting. I heard a lot of comments or statements that I have also have in my mind to be used when we make our recommendations to the City Council and to our police department. They are really, really good speakers. Thank you, Aaron. I learned a lot from your presentation about child abuse. Harpal, very good. There was one thing that really stick out in my mind, and that's what I've been thinking about that too. I'm not going to say that because or else I'll just ask that question if I may, but I'll just make that statement that one of them is very important to our police department to have. And then Derek, thank you. Very intelligent suggestions to us, a little deep, but and also saying about your experience, and also being an African American with of course African American family, which really started with, this whole thing when a Black person was the cause of all this awakening of our society. So thank you for that one. So very good speakers, wonderful, great speakers.
Thank you, Pat. Michelle, are you, hard to see you the way you have your camera set up, but did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Basically, I'm just appreciative of the speakers to come forward. I know sometimes this can be hard for people to actually tell what their feelings are of concerns or worried about what other people feel. So I'm glad that you took that leadership and took your concerns and some of your fears to bring that to our attention. I am concerned when Erin had talked about that we do have at least about 115 children from Union City, and then also about the 65% of Black children that are going through a great deal of trauma. I'm glad that you brought that percentage in so we could see the difference. So that I would like to probably dig in a little more with that information. And then Harper, I agree. I'm glad that he brought out certain things, especially about the next door about the 911 misuse, and also the workforce. The diversity in the workforce is so important for people to have someone that looks like them when it comes to coming out and talking to the community. And however, even the community, if the workforce, the police officers are a diverse workforce, we still need to have that talk and that conversation, because we also have to also be concerned that that officer could be concerned about what the other officers are going to say. So there's more conversation that needs to come out about that. And of course, Mr. Derek, I'm always glad to hear. I understand really when you talk about your sons, what they're going through, especially having nephews of my own and sitting up there. And like you're saying, it's a survival. We have to teach our children how to survive in this world. And whether it's in Union City or any city, it's very, very extremely important on how we talk to our children, which shouldn't be something that we need to fear or worry about, but we've had to do that. So I'm hoping that with the conversations that we have from the rest of the community, hopefully listening in or coming in to give a talk, to be truthful and wanting to express and give us an understanding of what could happen, what could be needed, what could we use. So I hope those doors open up for other people to come in and actually express themselves as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michelle. And Jonathan, did you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, a few comments. For Erin, I'm glad to hear about the services. As sad as it is to hear the services and hear that the statistics that came along with it, but glad to hear that your services are here in Union City. We're fortunate to have your services here. Harpo, you've given me some thoughts as someone who worked as a firefighter, so on a different side of the 911 system. It's brought up some questions that have been in the back of my head for years. Identity with the person in uniform and the community that they're serving, for one. You talked about police officers living or not living within a community. And then your points about 911 abuse, and I would be interested to know more about that within Union City, maybe even with demographics. I don't know if we'll get to that at any point later on in other sessions. And then Derek, I think probably the most important thing I want to say is I'd love to talk to you more. I really would. You sound like you have a lot to share and a lot of knowledge to impart on others. And I'd really like to talk to you more.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And I'd just like to wrap this session up by thanking our speakers and to acknowledge that we're trying here to create a space where we can have the hard conversations, the real conversations. And we know that there are people in Union City whose experience is not positive. There are some negative experiences, and we need to hear those, or we'll never be able to address and fix them. So I just thank the three of you for being real with us and sharing the reality of your experience in Union City. That will help us, I think, in partnering with the police department to get this right. So thank you very much for joining us, and you're welcome to stay, but we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda. So next on the agenda, we have public comment. And if we have any individuals who are listening, who are members of the public, that would like to comment about the presentations we've heard or the conversations we've been having, this would be a great opportunity to do that. You can click on the raise hand feature, and our staff will acknowledge you, and you'll have an opportunity to speak with us, or you're always welcome to send us written comment if you don't want to talk live to us tonight. But we would encourage you, if you're here, to know that this is a space and an opportunity for us to hear from you, and that's why we're here. So I would encourage you, if you have some thoughts, know that we would welcome them and would want to hear from you. So let me just check with Emma and see if she has any hands that have been raised or any comments that we should hear.
Yes, so we have 2 people with their hands raised right now. So I'm going to go to Michelle. I'm gonna bump her, turn on her mic. And Michelle, if you could start by stating your name and address for the record. And once you start talking, you'll have 3 minutes. Michelle, are you there?
Maybe not.
Michelle? Try this.
Try one more time. I just tried to unmute her, Emma.
Okay.
Michelle, are you on the line?
Okay, well, maybe we should move to, well, there she is. I see that she's been promoted to a presenter. So Michelle, are you there?
Yes, sir. This is Jackie and Michelle. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So there's 2 of you, Jackie and Michelle?
Yes.
Okay.
And we are residents of the Ponderosa Cove development in Union City.
Okay. Welcome.
And thank you. Thank you. We had some questions with regards to the Falk ambulance service being put at Station 30. Is this the right forum to ask a question on that?
Not specifically, but if you have a question, we can certainly get you the information. There was a press release about that just this week, and we can certainly get you the information about the opening of the Falk ambulance service in Union City. If you'd like to.
That's exactly why we joined tonight, because of that.
Okay, so do you want to leave us your contact information and we can send you the press release and the information about that? We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. So thank you, Emily. This is Jackie. And we did see the press release, so that's not something that we need. Our question is in your record now, your minutes. And specifically, it just regards sirens, sound, and traffic congestion. So if someone wants to get back to us on that, that'd be fantastic.
That'd be great.
And then just as far as your presentation goes tonight, I don't know if this is actually like a committee meeting or what, what this is for the city. But in particular, Aaron, as sad as certain situations are, your presentation and, obviously what you have to offer was quite compelling. And thank you for that, for the folks out there that have those needs. So important.
So thank you. This is a committee we've just recently established. This is our second meeting, and we're trying to create a space for community engagement, particularly around policing in Union City, and hear from our community members what their experiences are and what we need to do to improve the relationship of policing and our community to rebuild trust after some of the horrific situations that have happened in the news and the experience some people have had in our community. We've had a series of rallies and protests and events here in our own city, which makes us know that everyone in our city is not happy and satisfied, and there are some issues that need to be addressed. And we wanted this forum to be a place where we could dig deeper into what those issues are and come up with some recommendations for our city council to support that might improve our relationships here in the community with our policing. So thank you for joining us, and we'll acknowledge your questions and we'll get you some additional information.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So did we have another hand there, Emma?
Yes, we have one from Avity. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm also gonna unmute your mic, and if you could state your name and residence for the record, and once you begin talking, you will have 3 minutes.
I think there's just a time delay here, so there she comes.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, she's, okay,
Okay.
and your, oh, oops, your mic is
Hello.
up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Avity Norman. I live at 1501 Dakota Road, right across from Kennedy Community Center. I am really glad that this committee exists. This is very much a needed thing. First off, I'd like to quickly voice my support for everything that Mr. Derek Richardson said. I made a lot of very good points, much better than I could have ever said, and with much more personal connection to all of that. My main comments right now are about Erin Harper's presentation on Calico. I want to say your organization sounds amazing. You're doing really important work. I did want to voice a couple of concerns just about what is the necessity of the police involvement in this, with a couple of points of particularly, is it possible that some children or safe adults of color might hesitate to report because they are afraid of getting the police involved? And the second question concern is, there's a commonly cited statistic that states that 40% of police officers in a survey admitted to either physically or verbally abusing their spouses and or children. So I wanted to just kind of question, what's the rationale for having police involvement in this work against child abuse when it's likely that some or many police officers may themselves be abusers?
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The rationale for having police involved is when there's an allegation that a child has been abused severely enough that there is a concern that a crime has happened, then the police get involved. So at our center, we're seeing really the worst cases of abuse. So very severe sexual abuse, very severe physical abuse, often that involves hospitalizations. And at times we also are working with children who have witnessed either severe domestic violence in their house or murders in the community, and we're interviewing them as witnesses. So in those cases, a crime has been committed and the police are investigating them. And often, although not always, the police are the first people that either a mandated reporter calls or a parent who's concerned about their child calls. So it's not uncommon for either a school counselor to call the police, and that's how they get involved, or actually sometimes families show up at a police station asking for help, and that's what triggers our involvement. To your question, are there people who may not report because they're afraid of police? I think probably so. I do. It's hard in measuring kind of child abuse to figure out who's not, kind of to measure the negative of who is not reporting, because you can't really ask a family or a child, are you abused and did you not report it without then triggering some kind of systemic involvement? That's just not ethical. But what we do at Calico is a lot of community outreach, so reaching out to communities that typically don't report. So we've done a lot of work on with the undocumented community, with Asian Americans and other community groups, where we talk about that we are a safe space, that they can access services if they come to us. And often for families that are reluctant to engage with law enforcement, the fact that they know that their child will not be going to a police station, but will be coming to an office that looks really more like a pediatrician's office that has murals and stuff all around it, gives them some comfort. And we are not a government agency, we're a nonprofit, so we are able to say to parents, and often they will call us and ask for advice, that we have no vested stake in the outcome of the investigation or what happens with the law enforcement side. We are here to support their child and to get the story or the account of what happened to that child in their words so that we can make the best decisions about how to move forward with mental health treatment, with other family needs, or if there is someone out there who does need to be held criminally responsible, to then engage that way. But that's kind of out of our purview. I hope that answered your question, and feel free to follow up if it didn't.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you so much. Thank you for answering that for us, Erin. So I think you've given your 3 minutes, a little bit of your 3 minutes here to your response. Thank you so much for answering that question. We appreciate your interest, but don't hesitate to follow up with the organization if you'd like to know more. I know they'd be happy to inform you of all of their services. So Emma, do we have more hands raised, or have we completed our list?
We've completed our list.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks to those of you who are with us, who have taken this opportunity to raise your hand and share with us your thoughts. And I would invite you to come back and join us again, or if you have some very strong experiences and ideas that you'd like to share with us, send us an email and we'll get you on our presenters list and certainly create a space for you to talk longer with us about any of your issues or concerns. So thank you very much. So with that, we're going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is good of the order. This is a place where any items that we haven't had the opportunity to cover, we can address. And I know, Lauren, you had a couple of good of the order items you wanted to get back to us on regarding responses and how many individuals we have in queue on our spreadsheet.
Yes, why don't you do a round table and come back to me?
Okay, I'll come back to you. All right, so was there a voice that I heard there? Okay, this is a good of the order. I'm going to see if there are any committee members that would like to make any closing thoughts or suggestions as we wrap up this meeting that might be a part of our list of action items for our next meeting next week. Jonathan, I'm going to start with you. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
No, actually, I don't. There's a lot
Okay.
to digest that was shared by our presenters and even by our community members who have talked with us. And looking forward to spending a little time with myself, thinking all this through.
Okay. Melissa, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us under good of the order?
Yes, I would like to forward to the subcommittee a resolution that was passed that matches a lot the Karen Act that was presented in San Francisco, and it just brought it to my attention because Harpal mentioned, the calls, the 911 abuse, the calls about suspicious people who happen to be people of color, and it reminded me of that resolution. So I would like to pass on this resolution that was presented to the Alameda County Democratic Party last night, that was authored by Assemblymember Bonta, for our review to see if there's anything in that that might be applicable to our city.
Okay, why don't you forward that to staff and we'll certainly take a look at it. Thank you. And Pat, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Well, just like what I said, we have great speakers today, and I'm looking forward to the next our next meeting. And
Okay.
it's a good meeting. Thank you.
Okay. And Michelle, did you have any closing thoughts you'd want to share with us?
No, the main thing is I think we need to take some time and for the committee to process what was said today and how do we move forward on some of that discussion. That's what I'm concerned about, is just some of the things that we need to take in our minds and in our and say, okay, we heard this, how do we move forward? What do we do?
Okay, so we have a strategy for that and we'll certainly bring that to you. We are collecting lots of thoughts and input. And as was suggested earlier, we're not ready to jump to conclusions. We're at the point now where we want to listen and hear more. The more we hear, there are great ideas that are coming out to us. We're going to track those, tag those, and at some point we will have a planning session where together we'll look at those items and put together a recommendation. But we're not there yet. We're beginning. This is our first meeting, and hopefully as we go forward, they will get better and people will believe that we are here to hear the truth. I have heard some feedback that there are some community members that are not yet confident that they can come into this space and share openly with us. I hope tonight's meeting will give them some encouragement that they can, that we do want to hear, that we are invested in this and that we take this very seriously. So if you know of people that you think we could benefit from hearing, I would encourage you all to continue to send us those names. Lauren, you're shaking your head. I think you might have completed your, wait, Pat's got her hand up. Pat, before we go to Lauren, did you have a thought?
Yeah, in fact, I took notes of some of the recommendations and statements from our speakers because they were really good recommendations that we can come back when when we start gathering all the information. So it's a good thing. We're not ready right now for all these recommendations. We're just gathering, but at the same time, I'm taking some notes. I won't forget.
Very good. We'll be looking forward to coming back to you with your thoughts. I think we're all taking notes. We're going to have lots of possibilities and things to think about. So if you don't want to hold on to your notes, please feel free to send them to staff. They're collecting and gathering. We're getting them online. We're getting them in email. So if you want to send your notes in, know that we will receive them. Lauren,
Okay.
Did you want to update us on the spreadsheet?
Yes, so thanks for the question earlier, Pat. So I'm just taking a quick look and I'm just going to give you a high level spread of what we have so far. We did reach out, to the committee once again right after the last meeting to make sure you guys had a chance to send in names and email addresses. So again, I know some of you responded, but please keep sending information our way. Because there's certainly, I think when we look at all the various sectors of stakeholders, there's areas that could, we could use a little bit more engagement. Currently, there's a list of 13 people in the social service category. So Aaron's one of them who came up tonight, but we have others. A lot of these people have been invited to come speak. The next person from this category that we have coming to speak to us is a woman named Denise Campbell from Bay Area Community Health. She'll be coming closer to the end of the month. In terms of schools, we actually kind of are making more inroads there. Thank you to Jonathan, who was really good at connecting us to people in the school district who could be good representatives of this topic. And so we did reach out to the Marcus Lamb, who's the director of pupil services, and Manny Allen, who's a Black Studies teacher, and both of them are are ready to come talk with us. So, and the superintendent fully supported that. So we look forward to, we haven't had them scheduled yet, but we look forward to in the next couple of weeks having them come. Where businesses are concerned, you guys, I know Michelle, you had a long list of businesses that you had recommended, but we just need information on what those businesses are that would help us. Currently, we only have one contact under businesses, and that's the Chamber of Commerce. So, Pat, I believe that was your recommendation to reach out to them, and they are on our list to reach out to. Under faith-based, we have several people, and as of right now, Pastor Brown's going to join us next Thursday. So he's sort of the only faith-based person so far, but we're still reaching out. So what I will tell you is we've been sending out a lot of communication to the list of stakeholders, and not everybody's quick to respond. Sometimes people don't respond at all. So, it takes more work than on our end to try to pick up the phone, call them, and get them scheduled. So thanks for your patience there. There is a list that we call the resident advocate list, just sort of people in the community that are considered community leaders. In fact, I think Harpal, you're kind of one of the people on that list tonight who joined us. So we do have a group of 8 people there that we've been reaching out to. And I'll give you an example. We reached out to Mary Schlarb, and Mary actually responded back to us and said she really would rather us have somebody else and talk with the committee. And she recommended a youth group leader from Our Lady, OLR, Our Lady of the Rosary. So those are some good things where we reach out, and sometimes, we get new people who can engage this committee. So the list is growing little by little, but so far that's kind of a synopsis of who's on the list. And one more thing I just want to add, because I know Chris Carr is in our attendance tonight. Chris, if you're listening, we sent you an email to come engage the committee. So check your email and respond to us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the list continues to grow, and we would encourage you to continue to send us your thoughts and your ideas. So we have meetings scheduled for July 16th, July 23rd, and July 30th at this point, and we're going to take the opportunity to hear from as many community stakeholders as we can. At the conclusion of this, we do plan to bring the police chief in to talk with us. We have a list of questions and concerns that you have raised, others have raised, things that have been written into us that we want to give the chief an opportunity to address. So we plan to do that, if not at the end of July and early August. So we've got a full agenda ahead of us. I thank you all for joining us. I invite you to come back, be in touch with us. If after leaving this meeting you have a thought that you didn't get to share with us, please go to our website and send it to us. We are checking daily, and we are grateful and thankful for all of your comments. So with that, our meeting tonight is adjourned. And once again, I just want to give a special shout out and appreciation to our presenters tonight. And don't let this be your last time joining us. You can always join us again and be a member of the public, and we will give you every opportunity to continue to share your wisdom with us. So thank you for coming. And thanks to the committee again for showing up and contributing. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.